You're now listening to the Quarantine Sessions podcast with J. Cole.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Today we have Lon Milo Duquette as our guest on the podcast. Lon, you are a wizard primarily, is my understanding, correct?
Not according to my family. I don't know what to call myself. I'm a magician. I think I'm comfortable with calling myself a magician. And wizard's too colorful
Okay.
a term for the likes of me. So,
All right. Well, in your bio, you're described as being one of the most entertaining writers and lecturers in the field of the Western mystery tradition. So it's my understanding that when you speak about magic and being a magician, you're speaking to the spiritual lineage of the Western mystery traditions, right?
correct.
Awesome. Yeah, and you and I both share an interest in Thelema, which is the magical system created by Aleister Crowley. And I thought that a good way to utilize our time together might be to try to sort of conduct almost like a Thelema or Magic 101 podcast to try to break down some of the central concepts of Thelema so that one who's listening that has never approached the subject before and might be put off by the barrier to entry and the sort of dense and colorful language that it's spoken of, and be able to understand some of the central concepts a little bit more thoroughly.
Okay. Well, I better have a glass of water here.
All right.
When we talk about Thelema, let's sort of break it up into the formal idea of what Thelema is, and then the generic idea of what Thelema is. And the important part, the really spiritual part, is the generic meaning of Thelema. And the generic meaning of Thelema is or a Thelemite, if you will, is that anyone who spends the focus of their life trying to discover their true will in life and then endeavors to do that. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they realize that what they thought was going to be their will is not their will. But their whole focus is the idea that every unit of consciousness, but every person, let's say, wouldn't even be here, wouldn't even be conscious, wouldn't even have a place in this dimension were it not for the fact that there's something that must be done that only we can do. Otherwise, there's no reason for us to be taking up space like this. And that one thing which we can do, that only we can do, is generally our will. We could call it our will. And so the Thelemites' main focus is trying to discover what that thing is and then do it and not do anything else that would deflect you from doing that will. And there's a difference between the idea of what your will is and what your likes are, what your wishes are. It's not do what thou, Crowley's watchwords are do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It's not do what thy wish will be the whole of the law, or do what thou prefer to be the whole of the law. And it's not study what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, or it's do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And so generally speaking, we're not talking about even a philosophy. We're certainly not talking about a belief system. We're talking about a level of human consciousness that we share with a great many other people in this dimension, on Earth, okay? So generically, probably most Thelemites in the world, most genetic, or generic, maybe genetic too.
I'm sure there's some genetic Thelemites out there.
Yeah, that's scary. Most generic Thelemites don't even know there's a word for what they are. Okay. Right. They have just, they are just cooperating with sort of an atmosphere, a change, a universal change in human consciousness that has occurred in about the last 100 years. Look where we've come with human consciousness in the last 100 years. There's no mistake about it. Something big in human consciousness has changed in the last 100 years. And that change, we can discuss what may or may not be symptoms of that change or causes of that change, but it's inescapable. People are really, you're really different than your grandfather and your great-grandparents and your great-great-grandparents, okay? We're really, really different. And everybody, in a sense, is now in this new vibratory environment. And this new environment is what is bringing to the surface this idea of doing your will, of discovering and doing your will. And in a sense, it's related to humanity's new view of our relationship with the sun. The old way of looking at things, the old age thinking, where people weren't doing what they wilt, was based on an underlying sense of our reality that the sun died every day. That it goes down and it dies. The sun goes down, comes up, okay? And as long as we're thinking like that, the whole magical formula, and but more importantly, our self-identity is tied up with this incorrect idea that the sun dies and is reborn, or goes up and comes down, or teeters toward extinction in the winter. But now, all over the world, even in the most disenfranchised parts of the world, people are hip to the fact that the sun stays on all the time. Mothers all over the world are tucking their little babies into bed saying, don't be afraid of the dark because the sun's on the other side of the, okay, on the other side of the world. The world's spinning. We've just moved into our shadow. That's all. Sun's on all the time. Well, there's something in each human being, at the very center, the heart beating at the center of every cell of our consciousness, that identifies with the source of light, the source of life, the sun. And when we thought the sun died every day, we also, in the back of our minds, told ourselves that we die too. That what we see around us is death. Pretty soon we're going to go off. We're going to die. And this gave rise in the last 2,000 years to religions that said, okay, we've got to figure out a way to bargain our way out of this idea of us dying. We need a dying God to save us from dying. And we don't need that anymore because the sun doesn't go out. The sun doesn't die. That means ultimately we don't die either.
So this is fantastic, Lon. I wanted to break down what you've been talking about so far because you've touched on some fairly central concepts to the idea of Thelema, and I thought we could perhaps expound on them a little bit further. So first, just the word Thelema in and of itself means will. So obviously will is central to the entire system. And it seems to me that the true will is very similar to the Buddhist concept of Dharma, perhaps, or it could also be, in a certain sense, equated to destiny, I suppose, or the Tao, that which kind of is the causal chain of events within our life that lead us to fulfilling our essential role within the grand play of existence, right?
You said it just absolutely perfectly. I wish it would have come out of my mouth.
Thank you.
Because you've nailed it in vis-a-vis the other concepts in world religions and things. It's exactly what it is. The Greek word thelema is a special word for a special kind of will. It's not quite what you'd say in Greek. I will go to the store tomorrow, or you will not do that. Okay, it's almost it's a kind of will that implies divine intent. And there's two places in the New Testament that uses the word Thelema or Thelema. Please don't think I pronounce any of these words correctly. Okay, I'm too lazy to remember how to correctly pronounce anything. Okay, so don't quote me. Don't talk like me. But Thelema, this idea appears in the New Testament, which was originally in Greek, in two places, where Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was really kind of bummed out and getting ready to face his big day the next day. And he prays, oh Lord, let this cup pass from me. If it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. And it appears one other time in the Lord's Prayer, where it says, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will is done. So the idea of Thelema will, in a very profound way, is exactly the same thing as what people were trying to comprehend as God's will. for the last 2,000 years. And the idea that, and it's a good idea, you know, of course, the entire cosmos runs on, you know, some divine force, okay, that you could say that's the will. But the way they went about it for the last 2,000 years or so was that, okay, I want to do God's will. Like they tell you in Sunday school, oh, you want to do God's will, you know. So you attempt to figure out what God's will is and then attempt to cooperate with it, which is freaking stupid, okay? God's will is so huge, okay, that you're only going to get a little bit of, no. The idea of Thelema, of this solar consciousness, is that you can cut through that crap by discovering what your will is. And when you discover your will, you've immediately discovered God's will for you. Okay, it's that synchronization of consciousness that Christ was talking about when he said, "I and the Father are one." Okay, he synced up his will with the universal will, and popped off his heart chakra, and there we go. So the idea of Dharma, absolutely. Thelema is the closest thing to Tao. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, it is just another way of cooperating with the Tao, is discovering one's own will.
And it seems. Oh, please.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, and it seems quite true that it's not always what you actually necessarily want from a kind of small or egoic centered view. And I was reading about Jack Parsons last night, and after he completed the Babylon working, he sort of lost everything, you know, and was out of work and lost all of his money. And, you know, he talks about signing the oath of the abyss, like he had to choose between madness and suicide or the oath. And he had like no choice but to sign the oath. And they had this whole revelation about the Antichrist after that. In a way, it's almost like his ambitions in rocketry were kind of like small will, like small W. And it was almost like his true will was the manifestation of Babylon and the birth of the Moonchild, which you could argue that he was successful with based on the different kind of iterations in consciousness that occurred after that working, in regards to like the hippies and things like that, and the revolutions in the 1960s. And it kind of left him materially destitute and taken astray from his worldly ambitions. But yet you could argue that he completed his true will by doing so.
Yeah. So he lost the world but gained his soul.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Put it in the old-fashioned way of looking at it. Yeah, the idea that, you know, soon after that, the whole psychedelic and hippie movement that I came out of seemed to have been a part of the snowball effect of what Crowley recognized that got started even earlier than Parsons back in 1904. So that's the generic Thelemite. There's more generic Thelemites in the world than there are formal Thelemites. Most Thelemites, generic Thelemites, don't know there's a word for what they are. They're just finding out what their will is and doing it. And so you can see a Thelemite very often in a successful person that is successful in their art, or successful, most especially in their art. Okay, but even someone who is successful in business or in education, their success is a possible hint that there's a Thelemite there. Crowley said, hey, Thelemites are born, they're not made. And he didn't mean that it's a hereditary thing. He meant that Thelemites make themselves. Okay. Nobody makes a Thelemite. Nobody converts a Thelemite. Thelemites make themselves. And most of the time in the world around us, Thelemites that make themselves don't have really that much time to worry about if there's a name for what they are. Now, Thelemites with a formal Thelemite in today's language, if we're giving a dictionary definition of the term, would be a person at least who believes that the works of Aleister Crowley, starting with the received material that started in 1904, is the basis of an outward philosophy and religion, if you will, that is compatible with this new solar self-identity. And that's where you get the people arguing on on Twitter about how many Thelemic angels can dance on a Thelemic pin. But it's also where you've got Crowley used two sort of old aeon ideas of magical societies that could sort of serve as the outer face to this new step in formal magical practices. And the magical step, the last magical step, had a good format in this Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And that was like, in a sense, the creme de la creme of the Hermetic magical societies of the last 500 years. And Crowley was very inspired by that as a young man. And when Crowley's personal illumination hit, Crowley saw how this all fits in as the next step from that Golden Dawn formula. And so Crowley established a magical order where it's just a teaching order, where instead of degree ceremonies that you go through in a progressive manner that are representative or allegorical of states of consciousness. They use the tree of life, Kabbalistic tree of life, as the roadmap to that. The Golden Dawn rituals don't require you to actually attain those levels of consciousness that your degree ceremonies represent, but they're sort of to program you to accept it for when it actually does happen to you, okay? Crowley's AA system actually requires you to achieve that level of consciousness represented by those degree steps. And in pure Thelemic style, everyone who has that level of consciousness, whether they're in the AA or whether they're never heard of the AA, people that are identifying and living with and are the embodiment of that level of consciousness are that degree. So Crowley said Madame Blavatsky was master of the temple, and 8=3. Blavatsky never signed any AA paperwork, and she okay. But what they're saying is, what Crowley was saying is, of course, if you're vibrating at that frequency, the best we can do is just acknowledge you. And that's and go to work for that level of consciousness, do the work of a master of the temple, you know. And so Crowley has founded that AA with his friend Jones, and then somewhere along the line, Crowley's Masonic contacts conspired to put him at the leadership role of a Masonic magical order called Ordo Templi Orientis. And that is probably the most public and the largest formal occult organization in the world. It wasn't when I joined. When I joined, there were 6 people. But it's come a long way since 1975 when I was initiated. But that's a story in itself.
Cool. So there's also some concepts to break down here. So you talked about this new aeon understanding, and you compared it to the old aeon, which is essentially the aeon of Osiris, the idea of the dying and reborn God. And the idea of the new aeon, the aeon of Horus, is something that is very central to the beliefs of Thelema. So I thought that we could just expand on that slightly, if you had any other words to say about that.
I've got words. They're just words, but Crowley, after his illumination, and I'll keep referring to his illumination of where all of this more or less became frightfully clear to him. He posited that within human history, within human memory, there's generally been 3 great epochs of human consciousness. And of course, the new one, the one that we're in right now, and which started at the turn of the 20th century, of course, is the one that embraces the Thelemic formula. But he saw within a history of human memory that at least he could appreciate, there were 3 periods. And the first period was far enough back in human evolution that we really didn't have a 9-month attention span. Okay, we lived instinctually. We bred instinctively. we didn't put two and two together that men and women joining together in whatever circumstances cause babies. Okay, there was a time we didn't know where babies came from, but we sure knew that they came from a woman. Okay. We didn't know how she got that way, but we kind of figured it was her magic that made it happen. And that was big stuff. And she was big stuff. And woman was big stuff. And we looked at a woman that swells up like that for 9 moons, okay? And then all of a sudden she pops and out comes surfing out of her with blood and water, right with the timing of that moon comes little Og Jr. And we didn't have a 9-month attention span that it was Og Sr. that impregnated her, you know. All we know is she did it all. And it was almost like the earth itself. The earth seems to just do it all. It brings the plants, the animals come and eat the plants, and we eat the plants, we eat the animals. Okay, the earth was like a big tit. And it just fed us directly. And oh, not only that, when the woman gave birth to the child, she just picks it up and plugs it right into her, okay? Feeds it directly from her own body, just like the earth feeds us directly from her body. So woman was God. And that was the first of these aeons and the first of the magical formula. And all religious ceremonies and all superstitions and all awe and worship was poured to the female. The second, are you ready for this, or should we change the subject?
No, I'm ready.
After a while, it became pretty clear that without the introduction of the male sperm, that the woman would remain barren. And that we started to put 2 and 2 together, that she actually, at least for 20 minutes, or depending on how long the television's on, she needed the introduction of the male contribution. And it happened just about the same time that we were looking up at the sky and figuring out that the plants didn't grow on Earth and the animals didn't come on Earth unless the sun was shining a lot. And so we were starting to put 2 and 2 together. We were figuring out where babies came from. At the same time, we were figuring out, hey, without that sun, the earth isn't going to have any sort of fecundity. Just like our priestess over here is not going to give birth to little Og without a big Og. And so the idea of the penetrating rays of the sun, penetrating the dark earth in the springtime, and the fact that you needed a male to make the female pregnant happened at the same time, and bingo, all of a sudden, God was a partnership between man and woman, male, female, sun and earth. And that's the dawn of that second age. And that's the Osirian age. The pagan age, if we want to call it that, or the age of the goddess, was the age of Isis. And so the age of Osiris came up. And Osiris is this dying god. Because as soon as we figured out about this male thing being important, the pendulum swung, and all sorts of unpleasantness happened with the idea of the female goddess. But even more significant was the fact that once we knew that the sun was God too, we were freaked out because the sun died every day. It was really, really scary. And we feared the sun dying. We feared nighttime. We feared our dreams at nighttime, where we would dream about dead animals, where we would dream about dead relatives, and we would see in our dreams light. Our dreams were lit up by a weird light of some kind, and where did that light come from? And they eventually figured this light in our dreams comes from the land of the dead. It's the dead sun. It's where the dead sun goes at night. And we got to make a deal with the dead sun so we can ooga booga ourselves back to life. That's our only chance at immortality. Oh God, oh. And you can see how easy it is for priestcrafts to just completely take advantage of that situation and just clean up. And they'd been cleaning up for 2,000 years before we figured out the sun stays on all the time, and all of that is bullshit. And that's what Crowley did in 1904. He called bullshit on that particular way of looking at things. So can I say that? Can I say bullshit on it?
You can, yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Okay, well, all right.
You can use even greater profanities if you'd like.
Oh, give me time. Okay.
So,
or was that your question, or I had forgotten what the question was? Okay.
So you were speaking about the magical formula and how it corresponds to these different kinds of dispensations of thought. So for every aeon, for the aeon of Isis, for the aeon of Osiris, and for the aeon of Horus, there's a magical formula that corresponds with that. And this seems central to the practice and understanding of magic in general. But I think that it's an idea that people get confused by, because magic generally is more so seen as a way of manipulating reality to correspond to your particular desires or wishes. And my understanding of magic in a kind of Thelemic context is more of a carrying out of ritual that are related to the magical formula of a particular aeon, kind of as the core nexus of the religion of that aeon, right? But you've used the word magic quite a bit, and I just was wondering if you could help clarify some of those ideas, like the magical formula and what magic is in and of itself.
Well, I think Crowley said it best, and I always use his definition that magic is science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. So ultimately, any willed act is a magical act, and any unwilled act or reactive act is an unmagical act. So that's not very sexy. That's not a very sexy definition, but it's the truest one, and it's the most universal one. The way we think about the art of magic, you'd probably want to include a tag on that definition and say through invisible means, or by means that aren't always discernible with our senses. And but because it's a science, eventually we'll have machines and instruments to measure this stuff. And most of the invisible miraculousness of phenomenal magic, we can more or less now comfortably lump up into the black box of quantum mechanics. And all of it has to do with consciousness. Now, the medieval magicians who could make magic work to a certain extent, I'm not sure it made any of them happy. A few of them got themselves published, or at least their grimoires copied. In a sense, we're using the power of superstition and imagination and put it to work more or less accidentally on the quantum level to cause certain changes to occur that was part of what they wanted to happen. And but even the best of them, it was a hit and miss affair. It was like every magical ceremony was like an experiment. Oh, I wonder what's going to happen if I call up this spirit or that spirit. I wonder what would happen if I'd kill a mouse when I did this. It was pretty crude technology, and of course it was complicated by the fact that you had this dangerous institution of the church frowning on doing just anything that was different than church type stuff. And so you had all of that added guilt to what you were doing and fear that you're going to get burned at the stake too. So it made the art of magic just, something that just smart people just stayed away from unless they were really bold. But if they were bold, even their attempts, flawed attempts at making this technology work, actually sometimes worked. And it wasn't until they started to realize that in order to actually wield godlike powers, you needed to be godlike. And along about 1300, an alchemist and a famous guy in his own day, Abraham the Jew. You can find tales of Abraham the Jew. He was like the Henry Kissinger of a lot of European administrations. He's a famous guy in his own right. Anyway, he wrote a book called the Book of Abramelin, or Abramelin. And around 1888, MacGregor Mathers of the Golden Dawn translated fragments of it, which he found in the Bibliothèque Arsenal in Paris, which was just part of the book, but he published it as The Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. And it was the talk of the town, talk of the magical talk of London. And the idea of the Abramelin operation was an 18-month program whereby you gradually intensified your devotional practices toward a spiritual being called your own holy guardian angel. And it must have been hard for Europeans to be gaga devotional about anything. the church had just beat that out of people, and the Kabbalists were so in their brains. The Kabbalists just tried to think their way into Godhead. Sorry, you got to leave your meat head behind if you want to think your way into Godhead. And so it was really hard for Westerners to get that same sort of warm, fuzzy, God, I love God so much. I could just, it was really hard for them to get into that space. And so there's an 18-month program to get a cold, boring European into that groove, into that sort of Eastern, yeah, man, I love my angel so much. And that's the Abramelin operation. Bingo. For 18 months, you work yourself up into a socially acceptable nervous breakdown. And in that nervous breakdown, you can talk to God. In that nervous breakdown, you do get your holy guardian angel. In that nervous breakdown, your heart chakra does crack wide open, and you hit that level of consciousness associated with the six sephira of the tree of life, and you're off. But until you reach that level of consciousness, the magician does not know what is in his or her best interest.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do all sorts of funny little things. Oh, I think I'll do some magic to make the girl next door fall in love with me. Or I think I'll sink that ship over there. Oh, I think I'll get some gold. Those are like parlor tricks, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But magic is you raising your consciousness to that particular frequency. And then all of a sudden, you actually become who you are. Until you hit that, until you have your holy guardian angel, you're not you yet. So all of your magic before that point is being done by just a blind you on crutches. Okay. You don't know what is or is not in your own best interest until you get to that point. And when you are at that perfect point of balance, now you've got the momentum of the entire cosmos behind your will. Or let's put it this way, your will is behind the entire momentum of the cosmos. And so that's another thing that in the 1300s, the Abraham the Jew foresaw that was going to be the way magic goes. In order to exercise godlike powers, you got to be godlike. So.
And this is the progression of the AA system as well, right? Like, so every grade within the first order is ramping up until you reach knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, in which you discover your true will. It seems like the differences between awareness of like the egoic small self level and the higher self level, where you begin to perceive things from a deeper place that are blown out of the limited, small, rigid concepts of the self, right?
Right.
So I've heard this kind of put in different ways. In your opinion, is the holy guardian angel like an actual entity that exists outside of you, or is it more like a higher aspect of ourself, like a different octave of our being that isn't really separate from us?
It is simultaneously both of those things. Okay. Ultimately, there is no outside of ourselves. And because Rabbi Ben Clifford says, it's all in your head. Just have no idea how big your head is. That's absolutely true. Okay. But in order to work with the idea and the concept and the machinery of what it takes to prep yourself to achieve knowledge in conversation, you have to view it as an outside independent entity. You have to view it as an angel that's sitting around waiting for you to get your shit together. Okay, you have to think of it as something that loves you so much and that you are totally ignoring otherwise. You have to see it as hovering right behind you saying, just turn around and kiss me, you idiot, because I'm right here. You have to look at it like that. It's for I am divided for love's sake, for the chance of union. Okay, for this is the pain. This is the pain of division is as nothing, and so you have to look at it that way. And it's only when you've married the holy guardian angel do you realize, oh God, it's been me all along. Otherwise it would not be this sweet. I had no idea I was big enough to come together like that. Okay. And so it's exactly the same thing. So if somebody is at this state of their magical evolution, that the holy guardian angel is seen as that separate thing, I don't argue with them at all. I wouldn't dare step on that moment because that's what it's going to take. And it doesn't do any good for someone to say, well, when you get it, you'll know that it's just part, because that's not right either. So they're simultaneously the same thing. And it's like trying to explain a dimension where time doesn't exist to somebody who is invested in space-time and hasn't yet entered into that transcendent dimension.
So you talked about this socially acceptable nervous breakdown. It seems like, at least within the literature, having sort of a mental or psychological breakdown usually is what precedes the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, and the crossing of the abyss can be an even greater sort of mental breakdown, or even result in the collapse of a lot of worldly structures as well within one's life. Do you think that this kind of collapse or breakdown, this disintegration, is a necessary part of that stage of one's magical development?
Well, the most publicized ones, make it appear such, and not necessarily. Okay, the you that makes it across the abyss isn't a you that anybody else can pass proper judgment on. So it may appear like a very public one, and a very celebrated one is Jack Parsons. Okay, he blew himself up. Okay, mm-hmm. But the consciousness that one achieves, the consciousness one dwells in, is a matter that's completely ununderstandable to anyone else. So it may appear Siddhartha was a rich kid, okay?
Mhm.
The Buddha was a rich kid, okay? He's lost it all, okay? Had a lousy diet. Yeah. Now lost his wife and kids and he lost it all. So from one point of view, you said, oh God, this guy just blew it, man. He just lost his crazy guy. Look how he shaved his head and just, oh God. And, but it's a good thing that he did all of that, you know, and he did it in such a way as we can even discuss it and sort of laugh at, oh yeah, he lost it all, but he became Buddha, you know. And we could, you know, project that onto the Jesus myth too. Gee, they killed him. Oh God, they poked him and nailed him and beat him. God, he lost it all, and he was a rich kid too, believe it or not. And but gee, you know, what was going on in his head, in his soul, the level of consciousness that he was dwelling in, the body was just one step bigger than a piece of excrement. So.
And do you think that it's dangerous to pursue these kinds of things? Like, I watched recently A Dark Song, which is a very beautiful movie, but it's about the Abramelin working in a kind of, you know, it's a bit romanticized, fictionalized, but they actually portray it pretty accurately. But, you know, it's kind of all doom and gloom, and it's portrayed in this real spooky way. It's like, oh, dark magic, the Abramelin working, you're going to lose your mind, you're going to summon demons, those kinds of things. And I mean, even Aleister Crowley himself, like I've met people personally that if I mention my interest in Aleister Crowley, like they freak out, you know, like they freak out. It has this like gut reaction about, oh, black magic. And they don't want anything to do with me because it like freaks them out. I don't personally mind. It's a great way to just filter out people I don't really want to be friends with. But it's just interesting to look at that and to see why there is so much fear that surrounds this stuff. So this is, I guess, a multi-tiered question, but is the magic of Aleister Crowley black magic? Is Aleister Crowley somebody to be afraid of? And is magic in general something dangerous or something worth being afraid of?
If you don't want to change, if you don't want to grow, if you don't want to evolve, then it could be viewed as being dangerous to your unchanged self. And of course, anything is dangerous. Stepping out of your door in the morning is dangerous. And magic is not for everybody, okay? But everybody will eventually be absorbed into Godhead. And the magician is just somebody that is at least bold enough to say, well, I'm going to take as much control as I can to guide my self-evolution. And most people aren't ready to do that in any capacity. They're satisfied with ridiculous religious doctrines just because they don't want to really think. They don't understand the doctrines. If they did, they'd go, that's crazy. That's crazy stuff, you know? So most people just don't want to labor in their minds enough to make a good decision where that's concerned. And as far as the Abramelin operation being a dark thing, I bet that's a great film. I haven't seen it.
It's
But
great. You should check it out.
yeah, I should. The idea that you would go to all of that trouble to use a recipe book of somebody in the 1300s, a recipe book on how one person had to drive himself into a nervous breakdown to break through to that anahata chakra level of consciousness. To think that you could use his recipe book, slavishly use that recipe book to do it to yourself, you're crazy right there. Okay. Why would you want to do that? Except if it totally inspires your sense of magical art. And the people that I know that have done the Abramelin operation and have at least to their own satisfaction succeeded at it, it was because of their sense of art was such that, okay, I'm going to do it just like that. And they weren't slavishly following a recipe book. They were inspired by a scripture. Okay, that was their point of view. I'm sorry, I'm too lazy for that. I formally set to work to do Liber Samic, Liber 120, Aleister Crowley's sort of Thelemic abbreviated thing. Hey, but the Holy Guardian Angel didn't pop up for me after doing that. Well, I won't say after doing that, but I will say that when the angel came, when I got the angel, it was many, many years later. And what triggered the event had nothing directly to do with my magic operations. My magical operations only helped me to better describe to myself what happened. And I'm positive that what happened would never have happened had I not done 30 years of these crazy rituals and stuff. Okay, it turned me into the type of person that it'll eventually happen to. And when it does occur, you realize that it happens in a timeless moment. When the 30 years between when I did the ritual and 30 years when it happened, there was no such thing as those 30 years. That's impossible to describe to anyone else and expect them to understand. But levels of consciousness occur in timelessness. And that crossing the abyss, the same thing. Hitting Kether, hitting the singularity is another. And when we hit that singularity, we'll realize that we've been each other all along. If that makes any sense to you.
So it seems like a lot of people have these kinds of breakthroughs, including, like nervous breakdowns that lead to profound openings of the heart chakra, as well as singularity experiences through psychedelics like ayahuasca or 5-MeO DMT. Do you think it's possible that these kinds of shamanic technologies could be used either in replacement of these magical rituals or in supplement to them to achieve these outcomes?
Sure, both. The I've taken I haven't taken DMT or ayahuasca, but of course in the 60s I took a lot of acid and psilocybin. I love psilocybin, and I didn't do it to party, and I didn't do it to go love-ins. Okay, I did it. I was inspired by Timothy Leary and Dr. Alpert and Ram Dass, and this whole objection to that is, well, once it's over, man, you know, are you changed? You know, are you different? You know, sure, you were there for 10 minutes. Sure, you were there for, you know, but the real thing is, you know, yoga, you know, which is true. But the thing is, those are timeless moments. Okay, they're eternal moments, and depending on where you are, at what stage of development, where at one stage you'll need dynamite to blow the carbon out of your system, and there's sometimes that you just need a whiff of a flower to do it. So I don't point to psychedelics or one or another as the total key to unlocking your ladder of consciousness, but it can really help many people if used at least attempted to be used wisely.
So I suppose it has to just be dependent on the individual, and in a good student mentorship role, that would be of the guidance of the teacher or the mentor to suggest those kinds of things based off of a particular person's progress or of that own person's individual proclivities and callings to pursue that.
And hopefully anybody into magical practices learn to listen to themselves. And sometimes you just know when it's the right time to do something as dramatic and as radical as that. And sometimes it just doesn't. You just know sometimes when the universe has just made the opportunity inescapable. Sometimes you just know when it's time to do stuff like that. And or even you know, I'm so lazy and I'm such a cynical guy that I don't I like teachers and I like guides and things like that. But to tell you the truth, and I've been lucky enough in my life to have great magical mentors. Israel Regarde and Phyllis Seckler, primarily. And to tell you the truth, I've truly learned more in spite of their efforts than I have because of their efforts. And it's not because I'm so wise myself. No, I'm just too lazy myself. It's a profound level of laziness. I've embraced it, you know. But sometimes you just know when, okay, this opportunity has come up. I'm going to drop this tonight and get out my diary. So,
yeah, and you having come into magic through the awakening experiences that you had with LSD in the 1960s, there's a lot of people who have begun the journey on many different spiritual paths, whether they became interested in like rabbinical schools or Eastern stuff like yoga or Buddhism through psychedelic awakenings. And I'm sure there are many as well who came to the path of magic through those experiences. For me, myself, I first read books by Aleister Crowley when I was in high school, before ever having any kind of psychedelic experiences, and didn't really understand what he was talking about at all. And then later on, having had many psychedelic experiences, when I began to explore the work of Aleister Crowley again and to read it, I actually understood what he was talking about, because I had had experiences that I could relate to on psychedelics, that he was just using a different symbol system and a different language to describe.
Yeah. And yeah, it was super helpful for me. I really needed the dynamite. I needed the dynamite to because I was a stupid kid from Nebraska, just stumbled into the 60s. And, but about, I don't know, it's a couple times after a couple very, very wild, profound LSD experiences, I ran across the Tao Te Ching. And I read the Tao Te Ching, and it made sense. I was like 18 years old. And, hey, I love this Lao Tzu guy. This, I get it, man. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm probably going to have I'm probably going to have to take off and have dinner, or my wife's going to kill me here pretty soon.
No problem. Thanks so much for your time, Lon. I just want to ask you one last question. We've already covered a lot of territory. We talked about Thelema and the true will and the new aeon and the holy guardian angel and a lot of other really excellent stuff. But I'm just curious if you had any suggestions. If somebody was interested in pursuing a magical path, what are some simple practices that somebody could do to begin?
Wow. First of all, the idea of doing any kind of ritual where you stand up and do something, they always start you off with the pentagram ritual, and you fearfully get up and if I draw this star, what's going to happen is. But the point is, good stuff happens. Okay, when you do it. And I started off probably for the first 3 years I did ritual. I had no idea why I was doing it. Pentagram, then moved to the hexagram, and the Thelemic versions of this stuff. But the saving grace and whatever it was that I was attracted to do at first, it all became personal and effective when I decided that whatever it was I was going to do, I was going to have fun with it. It was going to be fun. Even if the devil popped up and tried to eat my soul, it was going to be fun. and that never happened. Okay. But the idea that where magic is concerned, there is a certain amount of power in initially overcoming fear. It is the terror of the threshold. And at every step of your evolution, there's the terror of the threshold. Okay? You don't escape the terror of the threshold. But you don't have to let it freak you out, and you don't have to let it stop you. I saw this documentary on Nova or something a few years ago about this guy who was just totally into spiders. He's the spider scientist king of the world, okay? And they showed him just picking up gigantic, poisonous, Australian, hideous things, and just pick it up with his hand. And he looked at it with this sense of wonder, and he would hold it upside down and sort of tickle its fangs and say, "Oh, this one would kill you in 40 minutes," you know. But his sense of wonder of natural science and the idea that he was totally into this creation and he was part of it, and he just took so much joy in it. That struck me, because that's how you got to go about magic. If it doesn't give you joy, you forget it. Okay, be a stockbroker. You know, take joy where you get it. And just like Laura Dern in Jurassic Park, when there was that huge pile of Tyrannosaurus or of Triceratops poop, okay, and the Triceratops was sick, and she said, "Well," and she just rolled up her sleeve and just shoved her arm into that big pile of Triceratops poop. Well, you know, magic is a lot like that Triceratops poop. And sometimes you just got to roll up your sleeves and shove your hands in it, because you will discover something. You'll discover something about yourself. And you want to take joy in that journey of discovery. So if I was going to give any one piece of advice, is, well, follow your instincts about where you'd like to go with magic, what you'd like to do. You feel free to experiment one way or the other, but whatever you do, enjoy it and take joy in doing it. Because before you reach a certain level of consciousness, if you take this stuff too seriously, it's going to drive you crazy. So just be crazy to begin with and enjoy the trip.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Lon. Yeah, this was an amazing conversation. And for all those that are listening, I highly recommend Lon Duquette's books. I think he has about 12 of them out. They're some of my favorite books written about magic, and I highly recommend checking them out. And where's the best place to find you?
Facebook. That's where I do a daily reading on Facebook for the entire pandemic. It's been a year, every morning at 10 o'clock. And to get my music and my books, just Amazon is the best place to start. And at least you can see what's out there. And if you got a local bookstore, please get it at your local bookstore, or order it from your local bookstore, because they need our support.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And thanks everybody who's listened.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
listening to the Quarantine Sessions podcast with Jacob.